Hi. Let's try something different. Until now, you've known me as the posh voice that reads Donald Trump's speeches word for word. I'll still be using that voice for the things he says, but reading them on their own has started to lose its effect. So we're going to start breaking them down. Let me know what you think of this idea in the comments. We'll begin with a post from his Truth Social. This one is very Trump. Okay, here we go.
ICE is removing some of the most violent criminals in the world from our country and bringing them back home where they belong. Why is Minnesota fighting this? Do they really want murderers and drug dealers to be ensconced in their community? The thugs that are protesting include many highly paid professional agitators and anarchists. Is this really what Minnesota wants? The crooked governor and Congresswoman Omar, who married her brother, don't mind because it keeps the focus of the attention off the $18 billion plus fraud that has taken place in the state. Don't worry, we're on it.
Okay, deep breath. Let's unpack this word salad like the responsible adults we pretend to be. First, ICE is removing some of the most violent criminals in the world. Right. In Trump's second term, ICE activity has escalated sharply. Raids expanded, agents deployed in deportations up. But early data shows that over a third of those arrested had no criminal record at all. So not the most violent criminals in the world. More accurately, the most immediately available. But hyperbole has always been his preferred substitute for precision. Then, why is Minnesota fighting this? Do they really want murderers and drug dealers ensconced in their community? Right. Let's unpack that. Minnesota isn't fighting the idea of deporting actual violent criminals. What Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz and local leaders, are doing is pushing back against how this latest immigration enforcement surge has unfolded. In Minneapolis and the Twin Cities, federal immigration agents have been deployed in large numbers under Operation Metro Surge, and that has coincided with multiple violent encounters, including the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE agent and other shootings that have drawn public attention and protests. It's the tactics, not the alleged presence of murderers and drug dealers, that triggered opposition. Reports of federal agents using force, tear gas, and making arbitrary stops have prompted lawsuits and court orders limiting how agents can engage with peaceful protesters. So no, the criticism isn't Minnesota wants criminals. It is Minnesotans and their leaders resisting an enforcement approach that has made ordinary streets feel like a battlefield and drawing legal challenges over civil liberties. But sure, label the opposition as Minnesota loves thugs. Classic framing choice. Next gem. The thugs that are protesting include many highly paid professional agitators and anarchists. Ah, yes, the paid protesters, a claim that appears reliably whenever protests happen, and just as reliably arrives without evidence. There is no reporting showing an influx of highly paid professional agitators in Minneapolis. What is documented are local residents, students, and community members responding to aggressive federal raids and shootings. Calling them thugs simplifies things. It avoids engaging with why people are protesting in the first place. Trump has even floated invoking the Insurrection Act, sending in the military. Because nothing de-escalates a tense situation quite like labeling protesters insurrectionists and threatening troops. A bold strategy. Historically. And the cherry on top? The crooked governor and Congresswoman Omar, who married her brother. Oh, that one. The married her brother claim dates back to roughly 2016 to 2019. It has been repeatedly fact-checked and debunked. No credible evidence. The story comes from blog posts, speculation, and confusion over old marriage records with similar names. It survives not because it's true, but because it's useful. We've seen this before. Remember the Obama birth certificate? Omar has addressed her actual marriages, including paperwork and tax issues, which resulted in fines. That part is real. The brother marriage part is not. But accuracy isn't the point. Repetition is. Why let facts interfere with a claim that still gets applause? Finally, don't mind because it keeps the focus off the $18 billion plus fraud. Ah, yes, the Minnesota fraud scandal. That part exists. There has been a large, ongoing federal investigation into fraud within Minnesota's social services and Medicaid programs going back to 2018. The most prominent case is Feeding Our Future. Its founder, Amy Bach, was convicted on multiple federal fraud charges. That happened. It was real. And it involved hundreds of millions of dollars in fake billing for services that never occurred. Governor Walz's administration was criticized for failing to act sooner. That criticism is fair. But linking this fraud case to protests against ICE enforcement tactics is where the argument falls apart. The fraud cases are being prosecuted in federal court. The ICE protests are about raids, shootings, and aggressive enforcement that swept up people with no criminal records. These are not competing narratives. One does not exist to distract from the other. But combining unrelated scandals into a single all-caps accusation does create the appearance of a pattern, which, rhetorically, is often enough. But linking it directly to why they're protesting ICE? That's a stretch. The protests in Minneapolis aren't about deflecting from old fraud investigations. They're about what's happening now: ICE raids, shootings, and aggressive enforcement tactics on city streets. And yes, a federal judge has since banned the use of chemical agents like tear gas and pepper balls against protesters. That matters legally. It limits what federal agents are allowed to do going forward. But it doesn't change Trump's story. Court rulings deal in facts, liability, and restraint. Trump deals in villains and momentum. So the protests will still be described as violent, the protesters will still be thugs, and any pushback will still be framed as interference. The irony is that the fraud cases Trump invokes are already being handled by the Treasury, the IRS, and the Department of Justice. That process is slow, boring, and real. Using it to justify turning Minneapolis into an ICE battleground, however, is not enforcement. It's narrative maintenance. So in summary, a real fraud case, real prosecutions, real court orders limiting federal force, and a political statement that connects none of those things, but sounds confident doing it. But linking it directly to why they're protesting ICE? That's a stretch. The protests are about ICE raids and violence in Minneapolis right now, not a deflection from fraud probes that predate this surge. Trump loves connecting dots that aren't there. Omar and Walz love illegals because fraud. It's conspiracy seasoning on a real issue.